And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft as we approach the bottom of the hour, almost 6:30 here on the West Coast as we still continue monitoring these anti-ICE demonstrations there in downtown Los Angeles. And so you can see there things getting quite tense like they have throughout the last now 4 days. What we want to do, though, we want to bring into the conversation the former acting vice chief of the National Guard Bureau, Major General Randy Manor. He joins me. And Major General, thanks so much for being with us here. I know you've been following these extremely closely. We're going to keep the live pictures up on the screen. That's what our viewers are very interested in, as they would be. But I got to ask you this. We just heard from the chief of the LAPD, Jim McDonnell. He said the president's decision to deploy Marines to Southern California potentially creates confusion, quote unquote here. You also heard from Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. She said this, that they do not need the Marines there. She even went as far to say they don't even need the federalization of the California National Guard as well. Now, you have been around protests and riots and demonstrations like this. With respect to the size of this, is that commensurate with what the federal government has done? The deployment of Marines, the federalization of the National Guard, do you think that's appropriate with regard to the size and scale of this demonstration?
So I would like to say three things. The first is that the size and scale is not commensurate with the 2,000 guardsmen that are going to be on site. That's number one. Number two, I'm very concerned about quite frankly, all of our ability to communicate in terms of our freedom of speech and also states' rights, which I think should appeal to all of us. I believe that the number of 2,000 combined with, as you know, the governor has the ability to draw on over 1 million badged and trained law enforcement officers from across the country under EMAC agreements. If they were truly pressed, we always want to use trained people to be able to engage with our American population and then use the National Guard as backup. And so that's my perspective.
Okay, so we also have this from the air. I want to put this up as well. You issued this statement to Fox over the weekend, and I think it's prescient. I want to read it here. Take a look at this for the viewers. You said this, that the president's federal deployment of the National Guard over the official wishes of a governor is bad for all Americans concerned about freedom of speech and states' rights. The governor has the authority and ability to respond to the civil disturbances with law enforcement capabilities within his state, augmented as necessary by requesting law enforcement assistance from other governors. There are over 1 million badged and trained members of law enforcement in this country. For the governor to ask for help if he needs it, while this is presently a legal order, it tramples the governor's rights and obligations to protect his people. This is an inappropriate use of the National Guard and is not warranted. I have to ask this. Clearly, the federal government, the Trump administration, disagrees with you, so much so that they have done these actions here. So who's right?
Well, first of all, as I started off with, even in my statement, the president has the legal authority to do what he does. I think it's also important that all of us look at what is the minimum amount of force required to achieve peace and stability and to protect people and property. And it's not maximum force, it's minimum force. One of the things that even in high schools and in colleges we are taught is how do we de-escalate situations, not by applying more pressure, but rather by de-escalating, whether that's in a hostage situation or whether that's in a civil disturbance situation. So I would just say that my point of disagreement with the administration is that I believe it's too early to have done what he has done. And instead, those forces could be there under the control of the governor if the governor so felt that he needed to use them.
So the entire rationale for all of this, from my understanding, sending in the National Guard, meaning that the federal government did not think that local and state law enforcement can handle it. That's the entire kind of predicate and rationale, because you were seeing some of these images and these videos over the weekend really kind of get out of control here. Can local and state law enforcement handle this with respect to what you're seeing? Is that your view?
For my 36 years of military service, of which much of it was in the National Guard, to include boots on the ground with civil disturbance training with National Guard units, as well as in combat situations with regular Army soldiers. I will tell you that it is absolutely the case that California can and could and can handle this with law enforcement only. I need to endorse that strongly. As by the way, I think any mayor, whether it was a red city or a blue city, the mayor and in connection with the governor would have those resources available to include the National Guard and, if needed, actually active duty people as well. So I think it's all about slight escalation to match the commensurate force and issues you see on the ground. So this is a matter of perspective. But having been through so many of these through the decades, personally, I will tell you that this is premature. That's my perspective.
Okay, I have to ask too, because some critics of these moves say there's a pile-on effect. It makes it worse. You're hearing that from Governor Gavin Newsom, Mayor Karen Bass, and others in California, that the federalization of the National Guard, the deployment of Marines, it just inflames things. But is there an escalate to de-escalate part of the strategy here, do you think?
Well, I think that could be the administration's perspective is to escalate, which then forces it to de-escalate. And I do understand that. I do believe at the same time it could go wrong at some point because sometimes when people are angry or frustrated and more force is applied to them. And again, think about this not only here in Los Angeles, but it could be literally in any community across our country, then they can grate and be aggravated at the show of force, especially from the federal government in their local community. So I think we need to be able to think through their eyes, not to allow violence. That's unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. It's what is the best technique to be able to defuse this situation and to let the local authorities, to include the city and the governor, to be able to deal with it. And the president should be there ready to support the mayor and the governor with requests the way that so many presidents have done over time. That's indeed my perspective.
Yeah, and I would imagine you're a student of history yourself. Historically speaking, we don't have many examples in modern American political history of essentially a president superseding a state governor and saying, I'm going to do this anyway, without the request from the state governor first. It was done back in 1965. President Lyndon Baines Johnson did it on the eve of the Civil Rights March from Selma to Montgomery. And from what I've read since then, no president has done it without the official invitation and request from a state governor. Is that a crossing of the Rubicon moment? I mean, clearly not. It's not unprecedented. It's been done before, but we don't have many examples, do we?
Right. I do believe that this is something that history has shown that there's been collaboration and cooperation between the states to protect the people and to protect property. I think this aggressive move to move in with federalized National Guardsmen under, again, Northcom's control. I think this is a very dangerous path that we're going down. And I do encourage all of us to think about this and to say, how can we deal with the situation at the local and state level? And then only at that point do we call in and ask for help when things are like, you know what, I think things are getting tough, rather than going in almost immediately.
Yeah, that's the other criticism here, kind of a shoot from the hip approach that some are saying the Trump administration did, that almost immediately taking this course of action rather than seeing, whether or not local and state law enforcement can get this under control. But sir, it has been, I mean, this is night 4, and so some would argue that, let's nip this in the bud sooner rather than later here. I want to talk about the role, though, from the federalized National Guard and now these 500 to 700 Marines that have been deployed from Camp Pendleton there in 29 Palms. What is their role? Because there are very clear-cut lines what they can and cannot do. Is that right?
Well, that is correct. I have not seen the rules for use of force for either of these operations from either the federalized National Guardsmen, which is a very, very important point before any force is deployed, let alone for the Marines. So I would encourage you as a outstanding reporter to be able to ask those questions of the administration. What are the rules for use of force by the Guard and by the Marines? Um, that is typically where, if it's not clear, it can get people, it can have unintended consequences either to the soldiers or to the Marines or, of course, to the population. So I do agree. We would all like this to just simmer down and go away. And I truly believe that it will. I am concerned about the precedent this is setting about going to step 6 instead of starting with step 1 or 2 or 3.
That makes sense. I just have to ask this though. You said use of force. From my understanding, these federalized National Guard troops and Marines, they are only there to protect federal property and federal workers. They cannot interface. They cannot really engage at all with these demonstrators. They can't arrest them. They can't push them back. Do I have that right? Because that is where the very kind of legally gray area gets to. We're talking about, violations of posse comitatus and other things here. And so it's delicate, is it not?
Yes, it is. See, it's interesting that under posse comitatus, those federalized National Guardsmen and the Marines do not have the authority to arrest and to detain people. If instead the president had allowed the governor to put them in a state status where they would actually be able to make arrests as deputized members of law enforcement. So kind of missed an opportunity here to use those guardsmen to augment the police if they needed that assistance. So you are correct. And by the way, I've not seen the actual order, so I want to be clear on that. It is something where these soldiers and these potential Marines are to, again, protect the ICE forces and to protect federal property. That is good. You have seen, however, where there have been National Guardsmen with their batons and with their shields right up against protesters.
Right. I just want to
also to understand there will be contact, but I think it's also important to say that we have now lost the ability to use the guardsmen to arrest and detain, which the governor, under his control, if he had deputized them, would have the right to do.
I see. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of highlight this, acknowledge, break in here. We saw this kind of gray van drive by. Many projectiles were being thrown at it. Now you see this kind of orangish, yellowish smoke there. You also see some of these other individuals from what I believe are also LAPD and also, I believe, some of these National Guard troops in front of the federal building there. Last point here, Major General, what are we watching right now? What are you seeing? What are you observing?
So I'm watching right now where there's just small formations that are trying to maintain mutual support and control, such that they're touching each other on the shoulder so that they know where each other are. They're protecting each other. They move forward whenever there is some kind of activity, and then they move back, which is, of course, what you do. You're not trying to escalate. You're also there to move back as well. Now, it is important for me to tell you that these are very likely law enforcement people that we are seeing, to include some of the people that might even be in fatigues. The picture is not tight enough to understand or to clearly see if they are National Guardsmen, because many of those people are actually wearing tennis shoes, which is they're not going to be guardsmen. They're probably going to be police in some way.
I see. We really appreciate your insight and your time. I know you've been on TV all throughout the weekend talking about this, and we hope you do join us yet again here. We're going to let you go. We're going to keep these live pictures up. Have a good night, sir.